Hey guys, with you here for Friday's assignment for May 1st. You'll also have another video in your email that has to do with some AP instructions. It wouldn't be a bad idea to give that a look, especially before May 4th. They want you to be able to test your testing capabilities, your technology capabilities. So give a quick look at that. I hopefully shortened it up for you instead of having to read through that entire thing. We're moving forward today and keeping with our practice problems, which have been going pretty good for those of you that have been turning them in. So keep that up. Hopefully you're seeing that there's really just a bunch of different ways to almost ask the same few questions. Okay, so again, keep practicing. I think missing some of them is a good thing for us. And again, a lot of you guys are having a lot of success. Okay, you'll be surprised that a 55 out of 90 in the past has gotten a 3. So you can still miss some and still be successful. If you get the majority of them right, you're setting yourself up for some success. Okay, so don't get discouraged. Keep trying them. All right, and realize that it's okay to miss a couple of them because that definitely is something that definitely occurs. Okay, with that, we're going to get started here. Okay, so if you haven't gotten to the practice problems yet, taking your own shot, make sure that you do that and pause the video and go ahead and take a shot. Make yourself better today. All right, so part number 1, it says, assume that the United States economy is currently in a short-run equilibrium with actual unemployment rate above the natural rate of unemployment. Okay, so we know that unemployment is bad right now if we just want to look at it that way. Now, it doesn't tell us to draw this graph, okay? But I'm going to put it there so I can reference it as we move forward. It's going to help me out as we get to this problem. Okay, so part A says draw a single correctly labeled graph with both the long-run Phillips curve and the short-run Phillips curve. So quick review, inflation, okay, unemployment. All right, and it makes me draw that long-run Phillips curve. That's the vertical line, right? Okay, long-run Phillips curve. Now, what we've got to remember, what it's asking you to do is that our long-run Phillips curve is the same as our basically long-run aggregate supply curve. Remember, we've done a couple times, we can look at this output line down here as employment going this way, unemployment going that way, right? Increasing anyway. And so what we've got to say is, okay, output is below full employment. Okay, so unemployment in this case is higher than what our full employment is. Okay, and then if we can remember what our graph shows us, here's our short run Phillips curve, right? If we can remember what our graph shows us, that employment moves out to the right, we can say, okay, here is a point where we have higher unemployment. We're going to label that with a P like it says, okay? And that's part A. All right, part B here says, assuming there's no policy actions are taken, will the short-run Phillips curve shift to the to the right, up, left, down, or remain the same? Okay, so we're saying, and this is why I drew this graph over here, right? Okay, so what we're saying happens is that we're going to have no policy action, meaning no fiscal policy, no monetary policy. Remember, if we have this recessionary gap, right, our supply starts shifting back over to the right until it gets to right here. Okay, so in this particular case, right, our output's going to eventually increase, which means our employment is going to increase, which means our unemployment is going to decrease, okay? And also look at what happens to our price level. Our equilibrium price level is going to go down, okay? So how can we put that over here on our Phillips curve, okay? Well, we've got to have somewhere where inflation is decreasing, right? Whereas unemployment is also decreasing. So this is where your organization of your notes, you can use your notes on the test. This is where the organization of your notes can come in really, really useful, right? To be able to find some of these answers pretty quick. So we're going to have to do this to show this. We're going to have to shift our curve over to the left, okay, to get the result that we need to have that's happened over here, okay? Now, it doesn't ask you to draw anything, and the test isn't going to make you turn in any drawings either. But if you can use these graphs as helpful guides, it can go a really long way. All right, it does have us explain it, and our explanation needs to be something like this. It's going to shift to the left, Okay. And as the short run Phillips curve increases gradually back to full output, okay, price level goes down, unemployment also goes down. We've proven that over here. All right. Our unemployment decreases. Now, this part B here is something that, again, as you get into the test, and I don't know if any of you would be into getting into the test and saying, you know what, I'm going to know everything. Hopefully you do. Okay. But understand part B here, it's just asking you, is it going to go up, down, or stay the same? Right? You have a 1 in 3 chance. You have a 33% chance of getting it right. Write some explanation in there, okay, and see if you can stumble into the answer. So if you get stuck somewhere, right, take a guess. Don't be afraid to do that. Worst case scenario is it won't hurt you, okay? It can only help you, okay? So anyway, that is a little bit of a tip. We'll move on to part C here. Okay, so moving on to number C, again, we've got to be able to tie that high unemployment rate into this recessionary gap, right? So I erased all the junk off of there so we could kind of see what was going on. So we've got this recessionary gap, right? Which, again, we don't necessarily need to identify for the problem, but we need to know that it exists because for part C, we're asking what does the Federal Reserve do, all right, the central bank, what do they want to do to lower unemployment? And assuming that their expansionary policy, okay, is going to be open market operations, they need to buy bonds, okay? So they're going to buy bonds / securities. Okay, that's what they're going to do. And no, they don't need you to explain either. You got a 50-50 shot of getting that right or wrong in that particular case. Okay, so if you don't know, it's buy or sell. Remember, buy equals bigger, okay? They're trying to expand the economy, get this aggregate demand curve shifted back over to the right. Okay, so for part D here, they kind of asked you, and I got to be honest with you, I got tricked by it. Okay, my initial guess is that I said it would be left the same, and basically saying and arguing that the government didn't change that, right? Well, the government in this case doesn't necessarily have to change that. Okay, so this would be one that you might get a little bit wrong. We didn't talk too much about it, but since we bought bonds, remember when we buy those when we conduct those open market operations, what happens is when the government buys the bonds, the government gives money back to people that hold those bonds, right? So now people have the money in their hands. The assumption is that they're going to put some of it in the bank, okay? And they're saying in this particular case that since there's more money in the bank, the federal funds rate, okay, is going to be decreased because of that increased money supply. I don't like the question. That's the answer. I got it wrong, okay? Don't let yourself get so caught up in getting every single one right, okay? So anyway, hopefully you guessed right. If you guessed right, good for you, all right? I didn't. Obviously, my answer is right up here, but either way, I didn't guess right in that particular case, okay? Don't let it get you discouraged. And then what's going to happen to the real interest rates? Well, we know that those are going to decrease, okay? That's the whole point of this open market operation up here. All right. And the whole goal eventually is it says, well, given your answer in part D2, okay, the decrease in interest rates, what's going to happen to our aggregate demand, okay, or real GDP, in the short run? Well, we know that it's going to shift our demand curve over to the right. You don't need to draw it. And again, those lower interest rates are meant to get people to borrow more money. We don't borrow money to save it. We borrow money to spend it, which means if we're spending it, we're going to increase our GDP. Okay, that's number one for you. Part F and G, you don't need to do. That's that 6th unit that we can skip. Okay, so part F and G you can ignore. We'll go on to number 2 here. Okay, so first thing for number 2 here is I copied what you've got in front of you. Notice I eliminated the equity part. We don't need to worry about that. Balancing these bank sheets, and they're not having you draw any of this stuff out, okay, but we want to know what we're seeing. So first of all, remember the two sides have to equal each other, okay? So 2,000 over here, 200 plus 1,800 over here, they have to equal each other. Read the question close. It says, assume that the reserve requirement, okay, is 10%. Now we're going to use this number more than one time. So first of all, we're going to use it as how much money does the bank have to have in reserve requirement, 10%, at all times. So they have to have this 200. Okay, now part A asks us how much of new loans can the bank make? The answer is $0. Okay, they can't loan out more than 90%. Okay. Okay. If you say due to the 10% requirement, that's where they're stuck. So part A is they can't loan out more money. It's one of those tricky things. They like to do that stupid crap to you. But again, understand what you're seeing. Trust your judgment. Okay. Trust what you're seeing and take an educated guess. Okay. So that's part A. Okay. So for part two here, okay, we have a new $100 deposit. Okay. And we've got to put this 10% into play again. So don't forget that number. But we have this person. He added $100 into the account. The question says that $100 of cash, okay, how much is the maximum amount of new loans that First Superior can make? Okay, so they get $100, okay? They have to keep 10%. 10% is $10, okay? How much is left over that we can loan out that's new? That's $90. Okay, so your answer for part B is $90. All right. You don't even need to explain it. Okay. So part B is $90. Okay. So part C, they don't tell you what you need to do, but they talk about that money multiplier. Okay. And so keep in mind what this money multiplier, all right, is that we need to remember that 1 over the reserve requirement, which again, the nice thing is you'll have your notes. Okay. It's asking you the amount of new loans that can be created in the long run, okay, or over time, okay. So remember that bank A can loan out $90, right? Somebody gets paid that $90, they're going to put that in the bank that the new bank can loan out 81, okay, and you got to take that 90% of each of those numbers. And so I wrote some rough numbers down there, right? And you're going to eventually add all those up. So you take the initial new loanable funds, which equals 90, okay. So you're going to go 90 times this reserve requirement, okay, which is 10, that's going to equal 900, okay? That's what it's looking for. The tricky part is you can only take out the number that I'm able to loan out. Now, I'm being honest again, I got the demand deposits incorrect, okay? I really wasn't sure what they were referring to. What they're trying to get you to show is that you can multiply that money, which doesn't make sense because if no one borrows it, the money doesn't get created. Bad question in my eyes, but either way, to kind of explain it, well, our money multiplier applies to loans based on how much can be loaned out. Our money multiplier to the demand deposits is on that demand deposit, which is 100, okay, which is going to equal $1,000. Okay, so tough question. One that I would have missed, okay, because it doesn't make sense in my brain. Like if it's a demand deposit, it can't create maximum amounts of demand deposits. And so how can you even say like that money is staying in there? So anyway, one that was kind of stupid to me, I guess. But you know what? Hopefully, there's a question on the main test. And if you saw the mistake that I make and then you make a different mistake, you see that mistake, okay, well, we already screwed that up once. Let's not screw it up again. That's the goal through some of this. All right. Part D and E here shortly. Okay. So another curveball they throw you, part D here. It's exactly the same as part C1. Okay. So it's how many new loans you've got your $90 new loanable funds, right? Times our money multiplier. You're going to be $900. Okay. And then part E, they're just picking your brain. They say, okay, well, what could cause people to not have this? What could cause the economy not have this many new loans? Well, remember, for this to work, we've got to assume that money is created, and these loans are always taking out maximum amounts. Okay, so in this case, there's two things that might cause not that much more money to be created. Number one is people don't borrow money. Okay, if the interest rates are too high, people aren't borrowing money. Number two, maybe these people that get paid this money don't put it into the bank and don't create new demand deposits where banks can loan that out. Okay, we haven't talked about that specifically. My advice to you on a test situation and that, just say something kind of smart. Okay, well, how come we don't get as much money? Well, maybe people don't borrow it. That sounds kind of smart, right? So again, there's probably a bunch of different answers you can write. The answer sheet gives us those. All right. Again, some of these things are obviously new with the limited amount of time that we've had to communicate and talk, but obviously we're trying to give you as many scenarios as we can. All right. Number 3 shortly. Okay, if you're like me, you're hoping one of these problems is on the test because I think we got really good at it. In fact, this question that I'm asking you was actually on one of your exams. So just as a review, all right, I set up my problem like this, okay? And part A says, first of all, I don't even need this, but part A says for who has the absolute advantage in producing donuts? Absolute advantage, remember, that is who produces more donuts, okay? Who has that capability? So in that case, it's John, all right? He can produce more. Okay, as a simple explanation there. Now, to figure out the comparative advantage, we've got to do some figuring here. All right, I set it up like this so I can put things right next to each other. I'm going to solve for D first. All right, and I'm going to kind of jump through a little bit. I'm going to reduce things. So we've got one donut equals 1/2 of a cupcake. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Okay, one donut equals 1/3 of a cupcake. All right, and I'm going to compare those two things here in a second. I'm going to flip it over though too, and I'm going to say 2 donuts equals 1 cupcake. I'm going to say 3 donuts equals 1 cupcake over here. So now I got to figure out who has the advantage, who gives up less, who has the comparative advantage in terms of producing each. Okay, so for Erica to produce 1 donut, she only has to give up 1/3 of a cupcake as compared to 1/2 of a cupcake for John. So in this case, Erica, I'm going to put a box around it so I know what I'm looking at, right? Has the comparative advantage, okay, in producing donuts, all right? It has to flip on the other side, okay? So here's the comparative advantage here for John. All right, he's got the comparative advantage in producing cupcakes. The question is, who has the advantage in producing donuts? That is Erica. She gives up less. Okay, and you might want to add, she gives up less cupcakes per donut. Maybe write the numbers in there, okay, as you move into it. All right. Now, part C here, okay, is a little bit trickier. I'm going to redraw some things and try to reorganize some thoughts here so we can see what's going on. Okay, so the first thing we got to remember is that we are going to produce, John and Erica are going to produce what they have the comparative advantage in. So John's going to make cupcakes. Erica's going to make donuts, okay? And again, I think organization of our thoughts are the most important part on these types of problems. So here's our trade. And I wrote it as solving for C, and I wrote it as solving for D, okay? Cupcakes and donuts. Now I can compare. All right, if we're going to trade 1 cupcake for 4 donuts, so John is making cupcakes. He's going to get 4 donuts. Okay, so we're going to compare that with that. Is John better off with trade by getting 4 donuts instead of trying to stop producing cupcakes and instead, producing donuts? So if he were to give up 1 cupcake here, he would get 2 donuts. If we trade, he gives up 1 cupcake, he gets 4 donuts. Okay, that's a good thing for John. That is a good trade for him. All righty. So part C1, okay, is that John is better off, okay? Yes. All righty. And you don't even have to explain. You can just say yes or no, okay? And so, again, you got a 50-50 shot. Now, if you remember, back in the original principles of econ, we talked and we said there is a way that these two people could trade to make both better off, okay? In this case, that's not necessarily what it's asking you. It's asking you if these were the terms, are they both better off? So now we can compare Erica, okay? So we said 1D for Erica gets her 1/4 of a cupcake, okay? So if she gives John, in this case, 1 donut, she's only getting 1/4 of a cupcake, all right? Well, is 1/4 bigger than 1/3? It is not. Okay, so she is getting less than what she would give up. She should just produce cupcakes herself if those were the terms. And so Erica is not better off, all right, in this particular case. I went ahead and I took this kind of one step further just to kind of try to prepare us for anything they might throw at you. And let's just say that they said, hey, identify a term of trade that would be beneficial to both. Okay, that's not what they're asking you here. That might be something they could ask you on a hard problem in this situation. Okay, so here's kind of the rule. All right. So first of all, the D has to be bigger than this. Okay, so whatever you pick for 1C equals, okay, the D has to be bigger than this. Okay, as you go forward, the C has to be bigger than this. And so I kind of throw some numbers around. It's kind of a guess and check type of thing, okay? But I just went with 1C equals 2.5 donuts, okay? And I changed that to a fraction simply because we're dealing with fractions. Okay, so I went 1 cupcake equals 5/2 donuts. All right, that satisfies John. 1 cupcake, this is bigger. That's good for John. Okay, now we've got to double check. Is this good for Erica in this particular case? All right, 1 donut equals 2/5 of a cupcake. 1/3 is 33%. 2/5 is 40%. This would be beneficial to both. Okay, there's a few different answers you can get plugged in there. This one's probably one of the more round numbers. Okay, but that's how you would figure out how to find terms of trade that are beneficial to both. All right. All right, last part D here. Okay, it's asking you to draw a production possibility for Erica. And it's also saying, hey, listen, there's going to be an increase in technology in the production of cupcakes. All right, so first of all, if I'm drawing my line here, that's what I am drawing, okay? I would label it with numbers. It might make you look a little bit smarter. It doesn't necessarily say to do that. I would do that in this particular case, okay? We've got new technology in cupcakes. We're going to shift that curve out to the right, and your new graph should look something like that. That is all it takes, all right? If you drew a curve to your line, that's okay. Remember, that curve represents, in terms of situations with production possibilities, like the idea that you can specialize. Probably wouldn't do it for an individual person, but for like especially an economy, the concept that we talked about was, some land is good for corn growing, some land is not, so we should produce RVs on it. And again, just like with some workers would be bad at making RVs, they would be better farmers. It creates that bow to that line where people can specialize, right? Either one you draw here would not be incorrect. Okay. Thanks for sticking with me there. If you didn't get a chance to look at that instruction video on the AP stuff, take a quick glance through it before Monday so you know what you need to do to prepare for some of that stuff.